This is the Mechanical Care Forum, and it's season 14. This season, we're capitalizing on the natural happenings of the day. We're chewing the fat on things related to mechanical assessment and patient treatment in the musculoskeletal space with special guests. On the ride home, today we're joined by Denise Campbell, discussing growing a clinic, using MDT for balance patients, and a tactical athlete program. All this on the ride home, today on MCF. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast for season 14. There have been several occasions in my career where I've had the opportunity to spend time with some very talented clinicians. I'm referring to those times where I've sat down with a colleague at the end of the day or at the end of a patient encounter and discussed the situation. I've also had a chance to travel with some pretty amazing mechanically trained therapists on one of our humanitarian efforts in Peru and chat about a patient we saw that day. Or I've connected on the phone with a faculty member who's had a memorable patient response in their physical exam that day. Some of these moments have been where I've drawn a clinical pearl or two, which has in small ways added to what has and continues to make me into the clinician I am today. So this season, I'm catching up with my guests after they've had a typical day in the clinic or in their work, and we're using the natural course of the day to be the content we draw from, to take something small away and use as further knowledge or inspiration or motivation, or just to put things back into perspective on the ride home. Don't worry, we'll keep our eyes on the road and our hands on the wheel and just have a discussion. So buckle up and tag along with us. This episode is brought to you by Therapha. Therapha is a front-end patient intake digital platform to obtain a great portion of the medical history and pertinent symptom history from your patient. Think of it like if a colleague gave you a quick summary of a patient, all the relevant information and no bother with the unimportant. Imagine if you had a colleague take the history for you, something like, okay, you're about to walk in on a 51-year-old male, a personal trainer and active cross trainer with bilateral knee pain. He says it came on years ago, accumulative with workouts, now prohibiting running and jumping. He says he's worse with prolonged walking, standing and rising after prolonged sitting. He reports no other medical workup. He explained he does notice a loss of motion and function when his pain is worse. You get the idea. In other words, it's like having a digital assistant to help you get to the heart of the matter a little quicker, so you know what clarifying questions to ask and where to invest the time in the physical exam. In my opinion, after using Therapha for several months, it's ideal for the busy clinic where time is of the essence. Right now, Sinju, the CEO and founder of Therapha, has a super generous deal only for MCF listeners. You get the first 2 months free, full access. Go to therapha.com/join/MCF. This episode is also brought to you by Atlas Health. Atlas Health is a web-based exercise and education delivery system. It's tailor-made for those of us who use specific end-range repeated movements. Compare these two scenarios. The first, you evaluate your patient, discover they show a directional preference. You explain it, give them a picture, and they come back 3 days later doing it wrong. You retest it, confirm it's the best one for them. You correct it, and 4 days later they come back reporting that it was initially helpful, but then it started to worsen them. You discover that you need to change it. 5 days later, they return. They're 40% better, but they've not been performing it nearly as often or to end range. So in about 12 days, they're just beginning to make some progress. Now, scenario 2, that same patient. They had the same response, but you use Atlas Health to deliver the exercise and the instruction, so there's minimal chance of misunderstanding. In 24 hours, they instant message through a secure connection right to their phone, requiring no app. They learn they appear to have a relevant lateral component. You clarify, change their movement, and provide the needed education, and within about 2 hours, they're headed in the right direction. They come back 50% better on visit 2 3 days later, and they fully centralize, feeling about 80% better by day 7. This illustrates the power of Atlas Health. Precisely animated exercise, carefully worded instructions, and education to head off the patient from doing it wrong, and with better connection between in-person visits. So if you want to make improvements in your practice, reduce the mistakes made by your patients, getting your patients to the outcomes they're after sooner, check out Atlas Health. And just for MCF listeners, you can get full access to all the exercises and education totally free for your first 25 patients. Go to atlashealthx.com/MCF. All right, let's get on with it today. Denise Campbell. She's a PT, an athletic trainer, diplomaed in MDT, owner of a private practice with 3 locations in southern New Mexico and western Texas, USA. Come along with us on the ride home. So with us today on another installment with this Mechanical Care Forum Season 14 on the ride home, I like to call it, is Miss Denise Campbell. Denise, thanks for joining us and having a little chat about the day and the week thus far.
Yeah, glad to be here. Excited
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, absolutely. Denise, you've been on the podcast before, so we're excited to have you back. Tell us, on a typical day or a typical week, what do you do? What kind of a commute do you have to and from the office, first of all?
Oh, I have about probably a 13-minute commute. I've been at it for 24 years, so we got it down, There's
Gotcha.
not really any traffic here in Las Cruces, so it's all good, right?
Right, absolutely. And
Uh,
what do you do on your commute typically?
I usually try to kind of refocus myself. I make a couple of calls if I need to,
Mhm.
on what's going on before I get into the clinic and you get, really busy. And then,
Yep.
on the way home, something I started years ago with my son, because I would come in, your clinic owner, patients, you can sometimes come in to your house with that same intensity or load, and your kids, your family kind of pick up on that. And so one of the things we developed was what was the best thing that happened today, right? What
Awesome.
was the best patient that you saw? What was the best outcome?
Yeah.
So I've started to try to do that just with myself. Now that my kids are gone, I don't really have anybody to do that, but it just really keeps me focused and
Yep.
keeps me in the right mindset. And then come home, enjoy, the rest of my day. Feel good
Yep.
about things.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, tell me, has this been a typical week for you this week? Typical day and week in terms of clinic,
Yeah,
and just
it's been
what
it's
you,
been pretty typical. We're doing a little bit more hiring and interviewing than normal,
okay.
right? I do a lot of that. I do a lot of recruiting and working on
Yep.
that. But otherwise, yes, we have meetings weekly. We have several clinics, so each one has a meeting day, and I meet with the leadership, and we have time for training. We go over how we're doing. We look at and so it's a set time. So I've been in that mode this week, and it's been
Yep.
good.
Awesome. And I know you're very thoughtful and intentional about what you guys do there. And that's why I wanted to have you on with this series, because I think so many people can gain from all the experience that you've had over the long career. Before we jump into that, tell people who may not know you, Denise, where you are, just a bit of a 30,000 foot view of your clinic and your practice.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I started my own practice in 2000. We just had our 24th year anniversary. We
Mhm.
now have 2 large clinics in Las Cruces, one in El Paso. We also do diagnostics now with our McKinsey trained therapist as well. We do EMGs and musculoskeletal ultrasound that we've incorporated. I joined the physical network in 2017, and we kind of run under that brand, but under my Southwest Sport and Spine brand, which was original, I have several different related companies. Like we have a comprehensive lifestyle medicine company. We go into industry. We have a special breathing program. So that's kind of where my McKinsey background is. I'm long. I'm one of the older ones now. All my mentors, I don't have too many more around them. I got my diploma in New Zealand in 1994, right? So, but it's really cool because Todd Edelson and Gabor were in my group. So we got to have our picture together not too long ago. So that's been our background. And I moved out to Las Cruces in 1990, and I laughingly called myself the McKinsey freak of nature at that time, because no one knew anything about it. And they're like, what are you doing? And, all that kind of stuff. And now, it's a very strong mechanical network in this part of the country. So we're
Yeah.
happy about that.
Yeah. How many clinicians, Denise?
About 30,
Wow.
30 clinicians plus some techs and different things like that.
Yep. So you call yourself, what did you say, the McKinsey what?
freak of nature.
Preach of nature.
That
But
was
your
back
staff
in the day. Now it's not quite so bad. But they're like, what are you?
your staff have given you a
Oh,
different name, which we see in the
yeah, my staff
background.
have called me Yoda. You can see my little thing out there, right? So there's a couple, it was a funny story because the staff was calling me that. My daughter's like 12 or 13. She said, Mom, they're making fun of how short you are. Because I am pretty short, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm like, no, it's a little bit more for wisdom and knowledge, and sometimes, yeah, we have to get after it if we need to. Yeah,
Awesome. I love
that's
it.
my nickname.
Yeah. So let's go down that direction for a minute, just about you building a practice. I mean, that's a substantial practice. Some people think I would never want to grow that large, and you may think that at times. Other people think, wow, that's amazing. I'd love to know, how did you do it? What do you look back and see in terms of those keys that have built something that is capable to grow or sustain or improve over time?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I never set out to be large,
Yeah,
and I really don't like it that much, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not like what I set out to do. And on that McKinsey freak of nature side is the other side. It wasn't known, and there's a lot of resistance at times.
yeah.
But because of the clinical knowledge and skill that I had, and I was an athletic trainer too in the past, and I'd worked seeing spine before, and then got hurt myself and found the network, fixed myself, started to help patients, and it's just created a huge demand of
Mhm.
services. Okay,
Absolutely.
when you have that ability. So I opened up another clinic. We had like a 50 patient waiting list. We've God has blessed us, and the real assets that we have to help people has developed a demand that just continues. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have strong clinical knowledge, like to move my family to New Zealand and felt like I'm giving the best I could to my patients. But at the same time, I realized that no matter how much I did, I could never see all these people, and then you have to teach it. So we
Yeah.
we kind of worked on that and developed a network and a partnership with the institute and with different things as far as training our people,
Mhm.
getting that on, and we work in teams, and so we just create little networks and we just repeat it, right, with this string of mechanical therapy and a couple other things, patient-centered care, lots of education type things, and that has really just been a push that just keeps growing. And
Yeah.
it's the challenge of how do you manage it? Because we're purpose here to serve people, right? And there's a lot of people that they need the right things. We became like a regional center. And so people would come in and stay and come from all over everywhere to be seen because, back and neck problems are very common. And I was more in the time where surgery was much more popular than it is now. I mean, we've gone a little bit off of that. I mean, I'm sure there's pockets, but it was pretty much you had a back problem, you laid in bed for 10 days with traction on you. And, people don't understand that now, how that was treated, right? That's why it was so weird for them. Or they took you to surgery,
Yeah.
right? So when we started to have a conservative, strong alternative that was very diagnostic and helpful to the doctors as well as the patients, and they started to trust us, just created a demand. And it
Yeah.
just continues to this day.
I hear what you're saying, and you hear that commonly from just business people who are, don't chase stuff, let it chase you type of sentiment, or just buckle down and stay true to what you know is right for the patient. And Dana Green has talked about it and how he doesn't really have to market because his patients do it for him. And yet I know other clinicians who are doing their best to deliver really good care and be patient-centered and use these MDT principles that we see so helpful, and yet they don't see the growth. So do you feel like that there are like tangible things that you have intentionally done in addition to just giving good care that have given you significant return on the invested effort and time and money?
I think so. I think a lot of it is not just what you do in the clinic, but people actually see what you're doing outside the clinic. So
Yeah.
I had some great opportunities early on. I worked in the hospital when I moved here. I would go
Mhm.
on rounds with the doctors, right? I would ask them for their worst patients. they actually started to say, and I would always, no matter what they sent to me, they said ultrasound, hot packs, 3 days, whatever. I would do that. But then I'd say, hey, is it okay? I found like a direction that makes them feel better. Is it okay if I work on this? I never just assumed or said, I'm right, you're wrong, because we're all on a learning journey. The
Yeah.
things I did to people before I knew better, it's shuddering, it's frightening, right?
Yeah.
So that was very helpful. And then being in the sports background, I would go to the New Mexico State University, and they'd have a time, and I'd see athletes with the doctors, like a training room type time.
Yeah.
We would do physicals in the community. And so people actually started to see the results, like they're not me trying to tell them, but they're observing it. So if you can
Yeah.
ever have a situation where you can do that, I taught at the primary care doctors. They have a residency here in town. So I would go and teach on conservative care of low back pain for primary care doctors in residency. And, just talking to them as people and the challenge we all have of how do you make sense of this? And how do
Mhm.
you how do you use therapy and how do you know it's good? And so I think those type of things, and then over time, just being very consistent and then making sure that your patient is being heard,
Mhm.
right? And not trying to fit into my paradigm,
Yeah.
right? So I think those two things were big for me.
Mhm. Denise, I'm thinking about a clinician out there who's running a clinic or department lead, and they have some sense or uh, privy to information like reimbursement rates and the challenges of that. And you've experienced this and seen it for a few decades,
Yeah.
right? And so you've been through it all. How do you manage that? Not getting down to the actual dollar amount, but just from a principle perspective, how have you managed? Because if there's no money, there's no mission, right? Is what the adage
Yeah.
is. So
Yeah.
how do you do that? And can a person survive on what, the decreasing reimbursement rates for all these CPT codes and the increasing overhead that it costs to run a clinic?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and there's different challenges in different parts of the country,
Yeah.
different practice acts.
Yeah.
We were fortunate here that we can have more extenders, so we were able to build a team,
Mm.
right? And then we've always tried to get therapists to work at the top of their practice act, in their training,
Yeah.
right? So and then have help in and around that,
Mm.
because just one-on-one with something was not ever going to make it.
Yeah.
And I worked in some Robin's clinics in New Zealand, as well as a couple of other people's clinics. And I realized then it wasn't me just standing there in the room watching someone do press ups,
Yeah.
40, 50, 60. They had 3 or 4 people at a time, and they were all different stages. And this would be on here. And they were scheduled every 15 minutes, right? So while we were learning all this stuff about detailed history, all these things, then you're in this clinic environment that you need to cut to the chase and get things done.
Yeah.
And so having a blend of that and being able to create a team of like-minded clinicians, that is like so key, right?
Yeah.
Now when I bring a therapist in, I don't try to sell them on MDT, because they're pretty strong manual therapists. They have a good background. Use what you know. But it's not long until they're wanting to see it because they see the effectiveness and they're in a system, right? So our PTs know it, our athletic trainers know it, our PT assistants know it, our techs know it, our front office understands it, right? So now then that gives you leeway for if you have a patient that might take 2 hours, that you might lose on, you can only charge them for, 45 minutes or you have someone else that's more in an exercise mode, learning to really operationally maximize your schedule, but keeping those core principles of well-trained therapists that are in a system,
Hmm.
right, of a team. And then realizing that you do have to play Tetris, we call it, right?
Yeah.
On all the different insurances, what you have to, Medicare has its rules, this payer only gives you 40 minutes. This one only gives you this many units. This one says you can't do this. You can only do that. Getting the technology and the understanding and the schedule that you can just maximize that. And it's a constant. That's why I was telling you we have these meetings, right? We learn to have consistent meetings because it's a challenge and you have to be on top of it. But we never want to lose our core of, what we're doing for the patient and helping as many patients as we can
Yeah.
with good
Yeah.
quality, of course.
Yeah. Of course. All right. So, you've got a couple of programs that you and I, before we connected today, have talked about that you're doing, and I just think it's innovative, and a lot of people maybe are aware of it, but plenty are not, I'm sure. So I wanted to go down those directions as well. Um, tell us a bit about your partnership with Physical, and specifically the balance work that you guys are even developing further.
Yeah, it's really been pretty exciting. One of my main jobs in the clinic now is program development, right?
Mhm.
And developing programs, developing clinicians, setting up for things as well as doing some patient care. But when I realized that the research and the knowledge about vestibular issues really came about, 15 years ago, starting to become more mainstream. And then it kept going. And I realized it was a huge thing we were missing in therapy. And I actually found Physical by looking into that, looking for vestibular programs. I worked with top level professional athletes, college. The research was coming out about if you have a head injury, you're more likely to hurt your knee in 18 months, vice versa.
Mhm.
So that's how I found them. And so for the first time, I would see dizziness occasionally, right? A neck patient would come in, their dizziness, they have a little disequilibrium, but it's not what they were coming for. It was
Yeah.
a side, it was just a part of it. So it just kind of went through that MDD paradigm, but I could also see how that could get clouded, right? Between which one and trying to be better at differential diagnosis. And then we had the training with Physical, which was very high level vestibular balance training, lots of really great equipment. They were finding they could return a person to sport, professional sport, and they would still fail some of their testing when they
Mhm.
came back. So I knew we were missing some things. And so the opportunity presented itself. And so our therapists are all McKinsey trained. Most of them, almost all of them are certs, once they have the time in the clinic. That person became as the front door to our vestibular program. And I actually had another diplomat with me at the time, Chester Brown, and he and I really worked on these programs. And so we put, our MDT assessment first, which Physical never did that, right? They always, a vestibular therapist is just going to check range of motion to kind of rule out neck. It's not a very intense. But the long story short is that we found that because people are coming for dizziness, we're doing this full assessment, MDT, vestibular, taking them through there, that we were finding that dizziness, ringing in the ears, disequilibrium, they're distal signs. They're
Yeah.
distal signs from the spine. And we were shocked, right? I think you maybe had Bridget Schodergertis on.
Yeah.
She has a nice podcast with you if you guys want to look at that on what we were finding. So first we thought it was like 15%, and then it went to 20, and then it went to 30, and now it's at 40. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's even up to 60% of the patients, it involves their neck and their thoracic spine.
Yeah.
And you actually do that testing, just you baseline test, treat, baseline test. And I actually had it myself, so it was like, okay, it's very obvious. And so it's been super exciting. I think it's just the uniqueness of our setting has kind
Yeah.
of allowed this to blossom and be known. And so we're really working on that. And we're laying out some case studies, getting ready to, if there's anybody out there that just wants to do research with us, I would love that
Mhm.
because I think it's something that everyone needs to know. Anyone can be doing this and really helping patients that don't get the help, right?
Yeah.
So if you go to a dizziness clinic, specialty clinic, but it's really mechanical, or to the doctor, you're really not going to get the help you need.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you're in the clinic some in terms of treating patients at times,
Yes.
Denise? Yeah. Can you think of a recent patient, just as a quick little summary and a blip on to illustrate some of what you're seeing regarding balance patients and utilizing MDT with those?
Yes, I can. There's a, I can even use myself even as example. There's a couple of major ones. I mean, Bridget had a patient that's kind of like our signature patient that had 7-year problem. He was a rancher. He traveled everywhere. He drove down from Colorado, and he had tried everything. They come in with their medical record stack, like this for us to go through. They're very afraid. And literally, I kid you not, retractions and retractions sustained with posture changes completely changed him, completely changed him. And he would stay there and do that. It's so simple. It's kind of like, how does a few press ups bring pain up the leg and into the back on those specific patients? It's that shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't believe it at first, even. I'm like, how could that be?
Yeah.
Right. And what we're still not sure on the mechanism. It's almost like the phenomena of centralization. My my nerd brain gets over here like, what is causing that, right? How's that working? But that was a big one. And then myself, I got up one morning and was walking down the hall and ran into the wall. I just went into the wall. And so went to my doctor. They do all these tests, making sure I haven't had a stroke. I don't, the whole medical version. And I'm like, there's nothing here, right? After I've spent like $6,000. And so I'm like, oh, I mean, this, why didn't I go here first? I mean, but I went to my doctor. And so I don't know if you guys know what the little cushion is for a modified capsid, and you do for concussion testing. It's like a thick little cushion.
Yeah.
So you stand on that and you look at how much you lose your balance. And then you can close your eyes and you see. Well, when I stood on it, I didn't have very good balance, but when I closed my eyes, 4 seconds, I fell to the right.
Mm-hmm.
So then we went in, Bridget did the assessment. We started the retractions, the neck was fine. Nothing changed it. We'd test again. But when we got to my thoracic spine and we started doing extension in the thoracic spine, that made a difference. And within 4 sets of repeated extension with overpressure for the thoracic spine, I went back and I was 20, 30, 40 seconds, no loss of balance with my eyes closed. And we're talking a 30-minute time frame.
Yeah.
Okay. So ear ringing is something else, that really affects a lot of people. Then you can sort that out from something that's more like BPPV, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like in the canals itself.
Mm-hmm.
And the old technique where we had our basic one where you sit on a stool, you hold their head still and you move their body under them. All those things can still apply to that, but really finding some quick major changes and using the technology and the test, treat, retest method, just like we do with all our baselines.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's so fascinating. So help reveal to people, I think we all are hearing more and more what a burden balance and falls are in our patients and in our society. Do you know any quick kind of stat that kind of puts that in perspective?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the one that always sticks with me is that if you have a fall and break your hip, 1 out of 3 of those people die.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 out of 3. We all think about our grandmothers, granddads, that happened. So that one's there, but the episodes of it are, they're large. It's anywhere from 6 to 8 out of 10 people, right, are going to have trouble with this after the age of 65.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
we just naturally start to be more careful, right? And so we don't really work it out. We don't work out our balance system. And so it kind of goes on that road. And then people really think that there's nothing that they can do about it. It's like, oh, it's a part of aging,
Yeah.
right? And I think part of what I see is we get in static posturing positions, right? Where we're forward head, we're forward here. Now then we're all looking up. There's a lot of, and so you get right into that area and just posture changes and mobility, those movements start to break up a lot of that. We just had a Parkinson's patient, Bridget did, and she had shaking, right? It's really bad in her hand. And what we've learned is to be very open-minded about what is the cause of that and not dogmatic that, oh, it's Parkinson's, can't treat Parkinson's, progressive problem. So we just look at any symptom now, and then we do a treatment and see if it changes it. And lo and behold, it stopped her shaking in her hand, and it has stayed better as a result. So what we thought was part of a Parkinson's problem is really not.
Hmm. Who are those players out there? If someone's listening, they're thinking, I really see the need for this, and I want to, sort out a service line in our department or in my clinic for balance. Who are those people that they need to consider? Is it just the primary care docs? Is it ENTs? Is it audiologists?
It's
Is it
it's
some of them?
everyone. And if you
Yeah.
have primary care where they're coming to you directly, like direct
Yes.
access, just in the past, someone would come in and they had their broken shoulder, they broke their humerus, right? It's fractured. Well, why
Mhm.
was it fractured? Because they fell,
Yeah.
right? So we treat the shoulder, but we don't treat the reason that they fell. So many of your patients right there in front of you, those are things. And in the process of evaluating this patient, we need to treat their balance, and you can send that off to the doctor,
Mm.
and they're all for that.
Yeah.
Medicare has really pushed it, demanded it before. You have to ask those questions. Have you fallen in the last year? Have you fallen and have an injury? So you can
Hmm.
just expand that because everybody's open to it,
Hmm.
right? And then you can also do things where you do some outreach, or you just do something where you have a fall screening in your clinic,
Yeah.
and they come in for like 2 hours and you have it and you screen people, right, that are having these issues. And that just starts to have a patient load. And that patient group goes and tells the doctor their success. And now you have that access to that doctor and let them know about your program and how you're looking at it and how it's just not normal. And then because they don't know where to send them either. Now
Yeah.
we're fortunate because with physical, we have an overhead rail system, so we can, do a lot with people without fear of them being injured
Yeah.
or ourselves being injured. But I think a lot of therapists, if you had enough, it's easy enough to get that. But
Hmm.
in the first part, you don't need that at all. You need
Yeah.
to, especially if you're more mechanically orthopedic oriented therapist, which the majority of the country is, then it's definitely something that you just need to expand a little bit on what you're seeing. And those patients will be there, and you have a lot to offer them with the skills that you currently have now. Just a
Yeah.
little shift in your paradigm.
Denise, if you were going to put together in 1 minute your screening process for balance, what would you include in that?
That would be just to test first, probably like a modified capsid, right?
Mhm.
Where Robin always said, when you're standing on the planet, it's what matters. So you can do all kinds of tests, but are they unbalanced? Is it actually affecting them in, standing? So that's one of the first things, like create that baseline. And then it's really the posture check, the range of motion, making sure that you can do whatever testing you're doing, that thorough history, very
Yeah.
quick to like kind of picking up that and asking the patient what is their greatest symptom that they want help with. It's giving them trouble. And
Hmm.
then just going right through that. And we also add coursing looking at their nystagmus, VOR test, those type of things. We used to do those a little bit more first. Now then we've moved those back to what I was just saying on let's just do just a mechanical assessment, orthopedic type oriented look and see how it affects your symptoms. And
Yeah.
then find a path, find something that changes it. You're just looking for a change as normal, and
Yep.
then retest them on the success of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Just a quick interruption. I appreciate you talking about the balance stuff. We're going to talk about your tactical athlete program next, but just For real quick, earlier this year in case conversations within our products, we highlighted a couple of interesting patients. That's our virtual mentoring resource where we bring in veteran clinicians, Denise, like yourself, with actual patient cases. I'm thinking of a couple here recently that we've had where they've failed orthopedic conventional care. One was a
Yeah.
69-year-old female with knee pain who underwent arthroscopy. Ryan Tozell walked us through that patient and found some solutions there within MDT and mechanical assessment. Another one was a 31-year-old female with a right shoulder pain. She was actually a physical therapist down in South Africa on a Part D, and she found some solutions with Ian Gray's help. So we're highlighting people like yourself, people like Bridget, who walked us through a patient in the past. If people want to check that out, they can check out case conversations at mechanicalcareforum.com. Thanks for letting me do that, Denise. Let's talk about then that tactical athlete. What in the world is that program? Talk us through how that came about.
Yeah, so being an athletic trainer and a PT sports medicine has always been a huge part of what we do. And now there's a whole section that I think that the world has brought about that's more prominent than it used to be between COVID, all the different things we've seen in the world go on, that there's a group of athletes out there that are either in the military, police officers, EMTs, FBI, SWAT officers, all this group. That is what we call a tactical athlete. Tactical means strategic, right? They're strategic about what they do. I've kind of gone into it. My son became a PT in the Army. And then on some other things I've done with breathing and things, we've worked with special forces and those type of groups of people and seeing what they have to be and then returning them quickly back to their job. So they're very much like high level professional athletes, right? Man, some of them aren't paid that way. They certainly aren't taken care of that way, but meaning that you're not going to go get another person to just go in there and do their job. Okay. And their job in society is so critical and they have lots of opportunity for injuries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we do a lot of sideline work, and MDT is so good at that. Just like if I'm a trainer on the sidelines, and we have a program with that called AccuSport, where you're just trying to get someone back to something in particular, and they come out and they have a little sprain, strain, or whatever, like the world will call it, we can treat it right then, right? And then we give them the skills to manage their self. Mm-hmm. So like they just need specialized programs. So we've developed that for the tactical athlete, of course, using a lot of our base systems. And now we're taking out doing a screening. We just did a screening on some FBI SWAT people as well as the local SWAT teams, looking at their injuries, how to optimize them, how to keep them in care in their field as long as they can, how to help them manage injuries versus just gutting through it, which a lot of them do. Mm-hmm. And then partnering with our community to make sure that those people are so important to the safety and the communities that we love to live in, right? They're on the front line. They're out taking care of us, and we want to take care of them.
Awesome. So tell us, is that pre-hire or post-hire that you're kind of then identifying, okay, where could this individual have problems or where do they currently have problems that might interfere with their job?
It can be all of that. The ones we just did is just like, just come in, we're just going to look you over. So we did a thorough assessment, assessed every joint, looked at their history, checked their strength, their speed, their breathing, all these different kinds of things. And then we set them on a program to optimize. That's that one. But you can also do it preventively. Like we're trying to work with some of the local folks that they don't have enough people that can make it through to become like Border Patrol or anything like that. So they're having to get people for 6 months and keep them and try to get them to have enough to have however many, 5. So they might take 50 to get 5. Mm-hmm. Right. And so they're not just doing it a little bit, they're doing like 6 months at a time and then working with those people. So we can help them on that too.
Yeah.
To try to get ready.
Yes. Who is that point person, just in terms of their title or who they were with, that really helped you get in with that group and just become then an advisor or a resource for them?
Some of it is the risk assessment people. like they're over HR.
Mm.
But where a lot of it came was through our own patients because we do a lot of workers' comp and we have that as a focus in our hockey sport, someone that's returning to something immediately, like a sport or a job. We have a specialized track for that. Um, we would see those people. So we had a police officer that got shot here and he needed a long-term care. We had another SWAT officer that, couldn't pull his gun properly. And so that's slowing down, putting him and his team at risk. And so in those groups, starting to see what's needed and just starting conversations with them. And is there other people they would say, oh, wow, I think my buddies would be interested in this, or, they deal with we went to the group and they said, yeah, if you've been in here 5 years, we're all broken,
Yep.
you know, they're broken for that was their words, in some form or fashion.
Yep.
So they really need that kind of help. That's how it
Are there?
started. That's
Yep.
what you,
Yeah. Are there more common ailments that you see in that group? We think about certain, occupations creating a vulnerability in a cervical problem or a lumbar or a lower extremity or whatever. Or does it run the gamut?
it seems like there's a lot more foot and ankle.
Hmm.
Okay. There's a lot of shoulders, which sometimes that's kind of tied into their neck.
Hmm.
But out of the group that we just did, I think we did like five. Almost all of them had something with the foot and ankle, lower leg, and shoulders. Of course, back pain's fairly prominent, just like in general population. A few of them had knee injuries that required surgeries, but I would say there's a little bit more, and you have to look at them biomechanically and, uh, kind of build them up. Like, do they
Hmm.
need orthotics, right? Are they optimized in their movement patterns? Are they restricted from
Hmm.
another injury and now they're compensating?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Has that program developed from when you first began looking into it? Have you seen that, okay, we were headed down in one direction and we found that that wasn't maybe as valuable to the clients or it wasn't really doable or feasible, and so we've gone a different direction or is it?
Yeah, I think we have two different ways right now as we've developed the pathway if someone comes in and they've had an injury, right? Their workers' comp. That was our first pathway,
Okay.
right? To like, okay, let's get you in. We have different ways of testing you, treating you, reporting on you, FCEs, getting you back to work. So there was that one, right? So we had that emphasis. But then it makes you look upstream, just like with patients, it's like, okay, wish we'd never gotten here, right? And in workers' comp, you can only treat them for what they come in for, like whatever their injury is approved. So if they have other things that affect this, you have to be very careful. You're not allowed to treat that.
Hmm.
So we started seeing that. And so that's when we're thinking, okay, let's look this more preventative and optimization. And that's kind of what we're in right now. And then partnering with the cities and the different things to help them take care of that group because they're trying to do things. Here in Las Cruces, they're doing a lot of things. They have cold plunges. They, set up a whole thing for them because they have a little bit different, they could be out for 36 hours sometimes, sleeping in
Hmm.
cars or on a long ruck or track or in some major shootout. And I mean, it's crazy, what they have to get up and deal with every day. Like I go to work, nice, air conditioned office, nobody's threatening me, that kind of thing. It's just a different mindset. And so trying to broaden our approach to help that. That's kind of where we are now. And then becoming that more of a teacher educator
Hmm.
on how to relieve joint pain. What are some of the things we could do, which all MDT people are so good at? And giving that knowledge, Mac always said, treat your own back, giving those books out, helping them, because they can't just leave work and go do these things, right? So starting to push that pattern a little bit more, that first part, prevention and optimization, as well as, and then getting good candidates for them
Hmm.
to utilize
Hmm.
versus spending a long time recruiting and they're really not the prospect that they want.
Yeah.
So there's both sides of that. So that's kind of where we are now. And working through, this is our first group that we're working through where we're doing these comprehensive assessments, setting them up on programs, and then we're going to track them and see if that helps over time.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yep. Just a quick interruption one more time. Within our research resource, Inside the Science, we've spotlighted some papers recently. One was on drivers of pain and disability. You and I probably are familiar with that paper. Yannick Tuzing-Laflamme, he actually be in Ottawa, I think, was one of the papers just to look at those five domains of what drives a person's pain. Psychoiliac test papers, like with Mark Laslett, centralization and directional preference papers with Stephen May. We've highlighted all of these within Inside the Science. And so if you feel like you're having trouble keeping up with the literature, you can check out Inside the Science. That's also at mechanicalcareforum.com. All right. Now, you've again have a large staff, Denise. You've got some people who've developed into leading the charge in certain programs, whether that's dizziness or the tactical athlete or just your professional development program. I know David's involved in that. Um, so help us understand how you build a positive morale, keep a positive morale, keep a drive within your staff to want to do better, to want to not just punch a clock and get a paycheck, but really personally strive to become better and better with patients. How do you do that?
Well, it kind of starts on hiring, just kind of make sure that this is a setting they want to be in and that they would enjoy and they kind of get to feel it and enjoy that type of yeah, it's a fairly fast moving clinic. Doesn't have to be always, but just it's very kind of upbeat and we call it 3.0. So you got to be moving at 3 miles an hour, 2 miles an hour. Leisure is not going to really cut it because we have large facilities. So looking at that, we use a thing called Working Genius, which is a great little test you can go on from Patrick Lencioni that tells you the two things that bring you joy and just like renew you, two things that you're confident at, but you doesn't necessarily bring you joy or make you feel good. And then two things that are very frustrating to you, right? And so then I can help put teams together, make sure I'm knowing their strengths, we're playing to their strengths, and then meeting with people one-on-one and like, what is it that you want? Like we tailor all of our job offers to their life. So if you're just out of school and you have college debt, you don't have a home yet, that's a situation. You've got little kids at home, that's a situation. You've got, kids going everywhere, sports, or you've got maybe an elderly parents you have to take. Everybody has a different life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we all come into the clinic to do this. So we look at that and we try to create and tailor make uh, packages and understanding about what's important to them. And then we articulate in over meetings and different what's really important to us. How are we going to strive and thrive? And what are our mission? What are our priorities? We just kind of discuss culture this week. Like, how do you make decisions when there's no good decision to be made? Like how do you do that? And then when you have upsets, kind of how to get over it. And that, we're just always behind you because we're always behind the patient. And we want you to be able to show up the best way you know how to show up, right? With that patient. And so we just take that, those are important. And then you get to know, well, oh, I really want to get this education. And then we have so much education that you couldn't possibly do it all, right? That we offer. So there's lots of tracks and different ways to do things. And so we try to tailor that over time. But I think it's really important that we understand what's really important to them and support that as much as we can. And then they know what's really important to the clinicians around them, the patient, and the business. And then we collaborate. And sometimes we have to give a little, and sometimes they have to give a little. It's just like families, relationships of all kinds. But we want everybody to win at the end of the day, as much as possible. As many wins as we can get for each other.
Sure.
And then have fun.
Yeah, yeah, that's important too. Denise, I'm sure you've got plenty of good examples of really rock stars and great hires that you've had. But you have to have over these years had one or two that didn't turn out to be well. And not to, mention specifics, but what did you learn from that process when you found this is not going well? And were there hints and indicators if retrospectively look back at that situation that you maybe learned from and thought, okay, I'll know that if I see this again, it may not be the best fit.
Yeah, I think some of it is they're just not in the right setting for their experience, right?
Mm,
And they may not be at the right time where they can really learn what they need to learn to meet the demand of the patient in front of them. Because
mm,
if you don't really have a good grasp on the problem that's in front of you, it's very draining,
mm,
right? And it wears you down, right? And sometimes people just aren't in that mode or they don't bring that background into our setting. So realizing, I've gone through times where I just need a license. We call it hiring for warm bodies, right? Like just give me somebody because the rest of us just can't keep carrying this load,
yeah.
right? So you really need help. So then you have potential for people that you think you might make it, but you're now, that you're looking at things like, well, they really didn't, maybe they were in home health and they never really had a strong orthopedic rotation, right? Or you find I've had people, they don't like people. They don't like people. They don't want to, and then others just really want to evaluate but not treat,
Hmm.
right? And so learn to kind of ask those questions and then over those do some pre-hire testing and then that first 90 days actually address the weaknesses more than just the strengths. Okay, let's see if we can do that. And then we come in and help them, right?
Hmm.
Say, okay, this is an area we think we want to work on, and we see their reaction to it. And
Hmm.
then the other thing is, I've grown in my maturity. I think I used to take it a lot more personally when things didn't work out. If someone had to leave, I've just invested all this training and time in them. And, there's never been a good exchange, right? And then, I would have a hard now. Then I just realized that it's just part of the journey that we're all on, and we want to add value to their life and their career while they're with us. They're adding value to our facility and to our patients,
Yeah.
and we just let that go. And just because this isn't the best setting for you, that's really important information for them. Not
Yeah.
necessarily it's wrong or failure. It's just not the best fit.
And I guess it's going to happen.
It is going to happen. And your really good therapist are going to leave. We lost a lot of people with COVID. They had to move closer to their parents.
Mm,
Their kids, weren't in school. Things are going to happen. You get sick yourself.
yeah.
You get injuries yourself. You have divorces happen. Kids go to rehab. I mean, we've been through it all, right? I've been through it myself. I mean, these things happen, and we try to make as much support as we can, but also understand when there's other priorities besides work, and you need to be where you can work on your greatest priority on whatever you see that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a tall order, but it sure is worth it, I think, to create something you can look back at and think, wow, we built something pretty cool here.
Yeah, and it's just easier on your own stress and their stress. Just be more, it's going to happen. It's like,
Mhm.
we have a thing in our family, it's part of it. Right?
Yeah.
So if you can't get over skinning your knee, don't get on the bicycle, right? It's just, but you're gonna have a lot of fun on that bicycle. It's gonna be okay. If you
Yeah.
skin your knee, we're made for that.
Yeah.
So just that kind of mindset just helps everyone, and then just wishing them well, but at the same time trying hard, but knowing when to say when. That's probably the biggest thing. Don't keep trying. That round peg is not going to fit in that square hole. You
Hmm.
can shift it and try it, but you really need to say, this is just not the best fit for either one of us.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Hard decision, but sometimes it has to be made. What else is happening with your practice that you're really proud of, or that you see a lot of potential with, or that you want to, go down, further into a direction, either with program development or just with improving your clinical product? What else is happening with South?
Yeah, I think we're one of the bigger things is it's kind of refining our programs. We've had a lot of
Mhm.
programs for a long time, streamlining more into systems. That's a big because we're bigger, right? And
Yeah.
each each clinic level needs a different type of priority. And so we're at the priority right now where we have to have systems and technology, right? We got to have that so someone can enter in, get into that system, get plugged in, and it's not depending so much on one person to train them. Like used to when we were smaller, we train everybody ourselves on everything, right? Even you find now, like they don't send you any manuals. There's nobody telling you how to do stuff. Here's your video, watch it, get out of it what you can and go on, right? So that's really big, creating that. And then just the development of all of our people, right? Working on our residency programs. We have our McKinsey tracks, vestibular, refining that process and making sure that people are staying on milestones. We're working a lot more on that, where before that might just get lost in the shuffle. So that's really big. And then probably the other thing is just building leaders, right? Building leaders, clinical and developmental pathways that people want, or that they can kind of plug into so that there's opportunity. So if you want to be the top clinician, then here's this track, and you want to stay in seeing patients, here you go, right? You want a little bit of a leadership role with that because you have a lot to share, then we're not necessarily going to put you over here in admin, right? But we'll give you, you'll have a little time to play with that in that system. Because when I came through, you either kind of went to admin or you went to clinical specialist and you didn't do anything else, right? So we're trying to create those pathways a little bit more.
Yeah.
And helping people find their way and do it quickly. I mean, right now, if a therapist stays 3 years in a lot of places, that's a lot. That's just the way it's changed, right? So how do we help them sort out what they need in those 3 years, and how do we prepare them for what we need in the clinic? So that's a big thing that we are constantly working on. And then, of course, recruiting and retention. Everybody in the country, right? We're turning away patients. I'm sure everybody's has that to a certain degree because we don't have enough clinicians to see them. And what's important to new grads, they have 7 to 10 jobs, depending on where you look, for everyone that's graduating. How do they figure that out? That's daunting on their side. What's really good, what's not. So I spend a lot of time on that just because we're a physical therapy business and that's what we have to do.
Yeah. Yep. Lots of plates spinning.
Yes. But they all work together, right?
Yeah.
They all work together, and I have a lot of great staff leadership. They've been with us for a very long time, and everyone kind of works on a different part. So it's not by any means, it's not me. That's what allows me to kind of focus on these things that I'm telling you about, because all the day-to-day operations and the working through that, a lot of people are handling that. David Gallegos has been with us a long time. He does a lot. Ryan Bybee, Sabrina. We have a lot of athletic trainers, and we have a lot of people in that 6 to 12 year range that are really looking for opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
that's why these things you're asking me about are exciting, right? Because this whole, you open your doors with your balance and vestibular with mechanical, they already have a very strong skill. It doesn't take much to change. And now you have a whole new patient base. Yeah. So if someone really likes that, they can go in that direction. Or you like sports medicine, but you really want tactical athlete or any of those. So it creates opportunity and provides the service that's needed in the community.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of things to be proud of with your clinic. I know you are, and your staff, and you've kind of lead the way in many respects from mechanical assessment and treatment type of centered clinic. So we appreciate all that you're doing, and we appreciate you kind of giving us a little glimpse into what's happening there and catching me on my ride home, so to speak. So thanks for
I appreciate you reaching out, and thank you for all you do too, helping us out and giving us little things we can pick up on and listen to in an easy fashion. It's great. I was around when there were people like you, Jason, putting this out there. So you've been a great resource for all of us. So well done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining the show.
You bet.
And there you go with episode 405 with Denise Campbell. If you'd like to learn how to build a thriving practice with significant internal professional development and multiple service lines maximizing a practice's impact on the community, listen closely to Denise. I appreciate her intentional effort to build her practice on exceptional clinical care, investing time and effort in her community, showing interest in other practitioners and their practice, sharing what she does, and doing it consistently. Develop specific programs where your skills allow and where your community needs it. For Denise, it was a dizziness and balance program. Dizziness and tinnitus, they're the distal symptoms that respond many times to repeated in-range movements. And the tactical athlete program, Denise and her staff have developed after finding what her community needed and creating a program to better solve those problems. Don't forget about hiring, something not all of us have to deal with, but if you do, you may appreciate how important identifying good fit is from the very beginning. Just a few important points I caught from Denise. Don't forget about our sponsors, Atlas Health, a more precise and professional way to deliver exercise and education to your patients. If you use in-range, repeated movements, and sustained positions, and you teach patients to test and retest their motion, and you're still using pictures from Google or hand-drawn stick figures, welcome to the 21st century. Get your first 25 patients free exclusively here at MCF. Go to atlashealthx.com/MCF. And our other sponsor, Therapha. If you could use a better way to intake your patients, gather the relevant information before the patient even arrives, and make you more efficient, check out Therapha and take advantage of this generous offer of the first 2 months free. You'll find that special deal at therapha.com/join/MCF. All right, thanks for coming along on the ride with us today. Be sure to come back next week and hang out with our next guest on the ride home for more of sharing experience for improved patient care.